I was house-sitting for an elderly woman. I never liked doing house-sitting jobs, especially in old houses where the silence felt heavier than it should. But when Mrs. Hallberg, a frail, soft-spoken woman in her late 70s, asked if I could watch her place for a week while she stayed with her daughter, I agreed. She lived just outside town, in a narrow two-story house surrounded by pine trees that swayed like tall, watching figures. The place wasn't haunted-looking or anything dramatic. It was just old. A bit too old. She handed me the keys with a shaky smile. "The house has its quirks," she said. "It settles at night. The floorboards creak. Don't be alarmed." I laughed it off. I should have paid attention, because later those same floorboard creaks would sound like footsteps. And then something worse. The first night, the house smelled like cedar and old blankets. I did a quick walkthrough. Living room, kitchen, small dining room, hallway, stairs, 2 bedrooms upstairs, bathroom. Everything was tidy and untouched, like nobody had lived there for months instead of decades. It was quiet. Too quiet. By midnight, I was sitting on the couch, scrolling through my phone with the TV muted. Every sound was amplified. The hum of the fridge, the ticking of a wall clock, the faint rustle of branches outside. Around 12:40 a.m., I heard something heavy shift upstairs. A slow thump, then another. It was probably the house settling, I thought. Old wood, temperature change, whatever. But the thumps weren't random. They formed a pattern. 3 slow steps. A pause. 2 steps. Another pause. As if someone was pacing. I turned up the TV, pretending it wasn't happening. The scratch behind the wall. Around 1:30 a.m., I heard a new sound. A soft scratching coming from behind the living room wall. It wasn't mice. I know what mice sound like. This was long, slow, deliberate, like someone dragging a nail across the inside of the drywall. I froze. Scratch, scratch, scratch. It lasted maybe 10 seconds, and then the house went quiet again. I stood there, holding my breath, waiting for something else. But nothing happened. I didn't sleep that night. Day 2. Questions I shouldn't have asked. The next morning I called Mrs. Hallberg to check in. She sounded tired but cheerful. "I'm just making sure everything's okay," I said. "I heard some noises last night." There was hesitation on the other end, a tight silence. "Oh yes, the house does that," she finally said. "Once you get used to it, you barely notice." But her tone wasn't casual. There was something strained in it, as if she was choosing every word carefully. I considered telling her the actual truth, that I'd heard footsteps and scratching, but I didn't want to sound paranoid, so I let it go. Mistake. The second night. By midnight, the house felt colder. Not normal cold. A chilling, damp cold that settled in your bones. I turned up the thermostat, but the air didn't warm. It felt like the cold was coming from the walls themselves. I stayed downstairs again, sipping coffee, trying to distract myself. Around 12:20 a.m., I heard something upstairs. Not pacing this time. Walking. Direct, steady walking. From one end of the hallway to the other. I muted the TV. The steps stopped. Then the floorboard closest to the top of the stairs creaked. Someone was standing there, right above me. I didn't move. I didn't breathe. For a full minute the house was dead silent, except for the faint hum of the heater. Then slowly, unbearably slowly, the footsteps retreated down the hall. But the house wasn't done with me. The door. At 1:17 a.m., the sound that started everything happened. A click. A soft shift of metal. I turned toward the hallway leading to the kitchen, where the back door was. The inside doorknob had turned. I stared at it, waiting for my brain to catch up. A quiet creak followed. The back door was opening. From the inside. I stood up so fast the mug slipped from my hand and shattered on the floor. The door slowly swung open, letting in a faint draft from the dark hallway beyond. No footsteps. No breathing. No movement. But the door stayed open. I stepped closer, heart punching against my ribs. My voice shook when I whispered, "Hello." Nothing. I reached the doorway and peered into the hall. Darkness. Stillness. No one there. I swallowed hard and placed my hand on the edge of the door, ready to close it. And then, a whisper, right behind me. Daniel, my name, spoken softly, right next to my ear. I spun around, nothing. Absolutely nothing. The house was empty. I was alone. But something, had whispered my name. The shape in the hall. I slammed the door shut and backed away, trembling. My heartbeat was so loud I could barely hear anything else. But then I did hear something. Breathing. Not mine. Slow, faint, almost thoughtful breathing coming from the dark hallway. I looked again. This time, I saw something. A shape. A darker patch within the darkness. Standing at the far end of the hall, still, silent, slightly hunched. Just watching me. My throat tightened. I blinked, and the shape was gone. I don't remember sitting down. I don't remember falling asleep. I only remember waking up on the couch at sunrise. Every light in the house still on. The house that whispered my name. I woke up the next morning stiff, groggy, and feeling like someone had pressed a cold cloth over my face during the night. My throat was dry. My eyes burned. My hands trembled when I reached for my phone. 6:12 a.m. I had fallen asleep without meaning to, and the last thing I remembered was that shape in the hallway. Or the absence of it. The way it vanished as if it had never been there. I tried telling myself it was exhaustion. A trick of the shadows. The kind of hallucination that happens when you're running on anxiety and caffeine. But there was one problem. The back door was unlocked. I know with absolute certainty that I closed it. Slammed it shut even. But now the deadbolt was turned to the open position. Someone had opened it. Or if something had. The call. I called Mrs. Hallberg again at 9 a.m. Hey, I said, trying to sound casual. Did you ever, hear things in the house? Footsteps? Doors opening. The silence on the other end stretched so long. I thought the call dropped. Then she spoke, her voice low, careful. The house is old. That's not what I asked. Another long pause. No, she finally said. I've never heard anything. You must be imagining things. But she wasn't convincing me. She was trying to convince herself. And halfway through the call, I heard a sound from her side of the line. A faint dragging noise. Like something heavy being pulled across the floor near her. She inhaled sharply. I have to go, she whispered. And the call ended instantly. I stared at my phone. Why did she sound scared? In her daughter's house. The notebook. That afternoon, I explored the house top to bottom. Anything to make sense of what was happening. When I reached the upstairs hallway, something felt wrong. The air smelled different. Old, like dust that hadn't been disturbed in years. And colder than the rest of the house. There were 2 bedrooms, hers and a guest room. I'd barely glanced inside either. Now I stepped into the guest room. It was nearly empty. A bed frame without a mattress. A dresser with no handles. A small wooden chair facing the window. And on the chair a notebook. A simple, worn notebook with a dark green cover. I shouldn't have opened it. But I did. Inside were dates, handwritten in shaky script. Notes about the house. Short lines like, footsteps again. Breathing in the hall. Door opened itself. He's watching me. My stomach flipped. These weren't my notes. They were hers. Mrs. Hallberg had lied. And the last entry, dated 2 days before I arrived. It whispered my name again. My mouth went dry. It whispered her name, just like it whispered mine. The second night, worse than the first. I tried to convince myself the notebook was old. Maybe she'd forgotten to mention it. Maybe she didn't want to scare me. But deep down I knew. I wasn't the first one the house had noticed. By the time night fell I was shaking. I turned on every light in the house. Even the bathroom light. Even the one above the stove. At 11:45 p.m., the floorboards upstairs started creaking. Slow. Measured. Footsteps again. But this time they didn't pace. They approached. Step. 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 Coming down the hall. Coming closer. Coming toward the stairs. I held my breath. The house went silent. Then, creak. The top stair groaned under a weight. Someone was standing there. Another creak. The next stair. I grabbed my phone, ready to call someone, anyone, when something unexpected happened. The footsteps stopped, halfway down the stairs. Then the whisper came again. Not beside me this time, not behind me, from the top of the stairs. Soft, almost gentle. Daniel. My name. Drawn out. Familiar. Too familiar. Cold spread across my spine. Because I suddenly realized something. The voice was not a stranger's. It sounded exactly like mine. The footsteps in the walls. The whisper faded, and the silence afterward was worse than the sound. I didn't dare move, didn't dare breathe. Then scratches. Inside the walls. Not a mouse. Not an animal. These scratches were in patterns. Deliberate. Pacing behind the drywall. Tracing the outline of the staircase. As if something was walking inside the walls, following the stairs. I backed away slowly until I hit the corner of the living room. The lights flickered overhead, once, twice, as if the electricity was straining. My heartbeat roared in my ears. My vision swam. I thought I would pass out. And then all at once, everything stopped. The footsteps, the scratching, the whisper, silence. A deep, crushing silence that felt intentional. Like the house was holding its breath. Like something was waiting. The photo. I forced myself to move. My hands trembling. I held up my phone and snapped a picture of the staircase. I don't know why. Maybe I hoped that seeing it through a screen would make it feel less real. The photo preview popped up. And at first glance it looked normal. But then I zoomed in. At the top of the stairs, just barely visible in the shadow. A hand. A pale hand gripping the banister. Long fingers. Too long. Bent at unnatural angles. Reaching downward. As if it was waiting for me to come up. Or wanting permission to come down. I dropped the phone. My breath escaped in a shaky gasp. I wasn't imagining it. I wasn't exhausted. Something was in that house with me. Something that whispered my name. Something that moved between the walls. Something that knew exactly where I was at every moment. I watched over an old woman's house. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I didn't try. God knows I did. I lay there on the couch, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ancient house breathe. Every few minutes, the wood creaked like footsteps shifting their weight. The old radiators hissed randomly, like someone sighing right beside me. And underneath all of that, there was a cold, subtle hum that I kept imagining as her voice. The voice that had whispered my name from behind the locked bedroom. I forced my eyes shut. I tried breathing slow. But every time I drifted towards sleep, the image returned. Her face in the doorway, draining of color, mouth slightly open, as if she wanted to say something but couldn't. Or maybe wouldn't. By 5 a.m. I sat up, exhausted and shaking. The house was dim, but not dark. Dawn pushed a pale line of light through the curtains. I didn't want to move. I didn't even want to breathe too loudly. Then something made the decision for me. A soft tap came from upstairs. Not heavy, not violent. Just a careful, deliberate knock. Like someone gently testing the inside of a door. I stared at the staircase. My throat tightened. Another knock. Same rhythm. Same pause. Top, top, top. The old woman who hired me, Ms. Renly, had warned me not to go upstairs unless she called. Yesterday she had called. And her voice had come from behind that door. But she wasn't here. She was at the hospital. So who knocked? My mind finally snapped. I stood, every nerve screaming, and grabbed my phone. I didn't call the police. I should have. Instead, I opened the flashlight and climbed. 1 step, 2 steps. The house felt heavier the higher I went, like the air thickened around me. When I reached the hallway, the knocking stopped. The bedroom door was closed. Of course it was. And then my phone buzzed. I flinched so hard I almost dropped it. The screen showed a notification. Front door opened. The security system, the one connected to the camera feed I had checked yesterday. My blood froze. Someone was inside the house. I sprinted downstairs, nearly falling twice. When I reached the living room, the front door stood slightly ajar. A slice of pale morning light cut across the floorboards. The cold air seeped in like a warning. "Hello!" I shouted, instantly regretting it. No response. I approached the door and pushed it closed. Not slammed, just pushed. And when it clicked shut, the entire house seemed to exhale. Then something caught my eye. On the floor was a footprint. Small.
Bare.
Too small for an adult. It led from the entrance, toward the stairs. My body locked. My mouth went dry. Before I could even decide what to do next, my phone buzzed again. One new voicemail. From Ms. Renly. I hadn't spoken to her since she left for the hospital. She must have called during the night. I put the phone to my ear. Her weak voice crackled through. "Please don't stay in the house. I forgot to warn you. Don't go into the bedroom. Don't listen if it calls you. It isn't me. It hasn't been me for a long time." The voicemail cut off. I didn't breathe. Couldn't. Then, behind me from the top of the stairs, a whisper drifted down. Not loud. Not angry. Just patient. Just waiting. "Come back up, please." The voice was hers. But the tone, wrong. Too smooth. Too steady. Too hungry. I ran. I didn't look behind me. Didn't think. Didn't lock the door. I bolted across the yard and didn't stop until I reached my car. My hands shook so hard I missed the key slot twice. When the engine finally started, I didn't even check the mirrors. I drove until the house was just a memory in the rear window. Ms. Renly died that afternoon. Heart failure. The doctor said she had passed around 2 a.m. 2 hours before I heard her whisper my name. I blocked the number. I quit the job. I tried to move on. But last night, my phone lit up at 3:17 a.m. A single notification. New voicemail 1. No number. No caller ID. Just a message. I pressed play. Her voice, soft as ever, whispered, "You left too soon. I wasn't finished." And in the background, faint but clear, the sound of a bedroom door creaking open.